Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're getting real about a topic that's finally getting the attention it deserves, menopause, but not just menopause, but millennial menopause. Yeah, you heard that right. We have a special guest, Lauren Tenenbaum, author of an upcoming book called Millennial Menopause, Preparing for Perimenopause, Menopause, and Life's Next Period like that. Lauren is a licensed social worker, a former lawyer, a mom of two, and an outspoken advocate for women's wellness and empowerment. She brings empathy, humor, and deep insight into what this next chapter looks like for the generation that's rewriting the narrative on aging and health. Thank goodness. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here and to connect.
Yeah, we're finally happy to have you too. So, your book's not out yet. How would you describe millennial menopause in one sentence?
It comes out July 15th and it is available for pre-order already. And I would describe it as the compassionate guide to the next phase of life that every woman in her 30s and 40s needs.
And what inspired you to write it? Did something happen in your personal life that sparked it, or your friends or family? What inspired you to write this book? There's a gap. This book is filling a gap that hasn't been filled. So,
Yeah.
how'd you get into
That was really the motivation. I realized that I was 39 last year and I knew nothing about the next phase of life, of health, of my reproductive health, my mental health. And I'm very well read and very in tune and very much always an advocate for women's health. And I didn't know anything about menopause. And I went to an event. I met Anne Fullenwider, who co-founded Alloy. The way she spoke about the gaps in care and the way that the other women in the room were so passionate about educating others, I said, well, okay, at least it's not just me who doesn't know,
Yeah,
but I think it is up to me to spread the word. And so I started writing and researching, and it led to the book.
I know Anne's pretty inspirational,
She is.
you know.
We're excited about this book, though. Before we hit record, we mentioned that oftentimes in the work that we do, we hear from millennials that say, I'm not worried about that yet. I'm not there yet, right? Because they haven't reached perimenopause or menopause. And it's misunderstood, to your point, Lauren. So I'm wondering, what does menopause look like for millennials, and how would you say that it's different from the experience of previous generations?
Well, I think primarily we are talking about it more. And much like fertility issues, maternal mental health in general, I will say that I think my generation of millennials are used to talking about previously private things. Menopause is not yet at the forefront of our conversations. I think in part because we are so ignorant and under taught, but also because people tend to fear aging, especially women aging. And that's just a cultural shift that needs to happen that, the work that you do is lending itself to that. So thank you for earlier calling me an outspoken advocate. I am proud to wear that hat and be loud. I think that we have to be loud together. I know that not everyone has the privilege of being loud, and I view my privilege as an opportunity to use my voice to speak up.
Yeah. Thank
Millennials,
you.
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Kim, go.
Oh, okay. You write that this generation still thinks this is a little bit of taboo. What did you find in your research for the book?
I found a very wide range of reactions. I interviewed over 4 dozen experts in this space. Many of them are millennials themselves. And I also surveyed over 120 lay women. And the reactions ranged from, ew, I don't want to talk about it, gross, I'm afraid, but also very basic questions. Please tell us what we need to know. Where do I go? How do I find more information? Why aren't we talking about it? And I think those knee-jerk reactions with that negative implication is again due to the cultural impact that we have, the culture in which we live, that aging is something to be feared or is, quote unquote, gross. Aging is not gross. It's a privilege. I understand it comes with, some negative consequences, like to our health, but that's all the more reason why we have to get prepared and really feel that we're in a position of power and optimize our health.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think to your point, Lauren, menopause just has this intersectionality of so many things, right? Gender, ageism, that people don't want to talk about it. I was just reading last night in a book that the anti-aging industry for cosmetics, makeup, wellness, so supplements are folded in that as well. It's over a $500 billion industry. So we still want to look young, stay young, fit into that box, which may have, I think it plays a big piece in why we don't have these conversations, right? And particularly Kim and I are focused on the workplace. So I think that, obviously funnels into the workplace as well. We don't want to be seen as old and not capable. But there are a lot of misconceptions out there as well about perimenopause, menopause. I mean, the laundry list that we have is very, very long, but I'd love to hear from you and maybe some of the things that you challenged or wanted to challenge in your book.
Sure. So there are quite a few, and go get the book and you can read all of them. I would say the first misconception or first lesson that I learned is that perimenopause symptoms can start in one's 30s. So when we say things like, ew, that's gross, I don't want to think about it, I'm so far away from it, I'm not trying to scare people and say, create this sense of urgency that you must, but I do want to raise awareness that actually you might already be in it, right? And I do believe that knowledge is power, not to mention the many women, many of whom you might know, who go through earlier premature menopause and they're feeling probably especially lonely and that they don't know who to talk to or where to turn for further information. So it's important to normalize this experience and to normalize that it can start in one's 30s. I also think it's really important to teach people that support is available and that can be in the form of hormone therapy, which still today in 2025 has a lot of misconceptions around it. And many women I interviewed said, doesn't it cause breast cancer? I was taught the only thing I ever heard about menopause was to stay away from hormone treatment. Doctors I spoke with were taught to avoid it, etc. So that is obviously a major, major myth that has been debunked, but we still need to use our voices to spread that message. So I'm really proud to be able to do that through this book.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing that a study that is over 20 years old is still affecting us and our society and the way that we look at hormone therapy? And I find it interesting too. Sometimes I'll challenge it and say, where did you hear that? And people don't even know where they heard it,
Yeah.
right? So it doesn't even link directly back to that study.
Oh
It's
yeah, they don't even know what the study is, but that's
Right.
just the
yeah, I
word on
just
the street.
heard. Yeah, exactly. Word on the street. Yeah, yeah. And I also find it interesting, and I'm so glad that you brought this up about early menopause. I'm one of those. I went through early menopause, and my doctor said, "Oh, that's normal. Go home, right? Deal with it." And it's not. It's not. And it was very, very challenging to your point. And I think it's an important conversation to have because not only is it lonely and isolating and you don't know where to go for help, as you mentioned, but I think a lot of women are waiting later to have children. And if you know this going into that family planning, that you could start menopause early and look at the genetics and your family history, it's important to note that, right? Going into that family planning stage of your life, don't wait too long. Perhaps don't wait too long, right?
But
Maybe
don't do it too early.
and don't do it too early either.
For
Yeah,
our
we still
daughters who are
aren't supposed to have
listening,
them yet. Yeah.
yeah.
I
Hold
think
on.
whatever you choose,
Yeah.
know that it's not in your head if you
Mhm.
are feeling unlike yourself. And whether it's due to postpartum issues or to perimenopause or to both simultaneously, you deserve and can access help. And that's my mission. My day job is as a therapist, and I've been primarily focusing on women in their 20s and 30s who are emerging adults and or family planning and or new mothers. And I see a lot of perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And as I've shifted my focus a bit into the perimenopause space, the amount of times I've seen, actually, you are postpartum, but you're also in perimenopause.
Yeah.
And I've heard that from providers as well. And so it's definitely something we need to shine a light on.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting because you bring a different lens on this, both from a clinical experience and a legal background. How does your work as a social worker and lawyer shape your book and your perspective on this?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I am a lot of things, but certainly not a healthcare provider. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse practitioner. So, I don't have that science background. But what I do have is the mental health background, the advocacy background, and the storytelling background. And that's why I wanted to write this book with all of those perspectives. For me, menopause, it wasn't something that I was personally experiencing that led me to write this. But once I became aware of it, I felt compelled to tell these stories, to find out more information, because it's a continuation of all of my work thus far on women's reproductive health care, their autonomy, their access to mental health care, and to community building.
Mhm.
And when it comes to my legal background, I used to practice primarily immigration law, which is not quite applicable here, but just in terms of social justice and speaking up for what's right and
Yeah.
changing workplace policies, which obviously I know is near and dear to your heart,
Yeah.
that all came into play. And so it's not just the perspective of a mental health clinician, but also an advocate. And I pride myself on being one.
Yeah. Can I switch gears a little bit here, Lauren? Because I love educating and bringing awareness to our audience, but I also love for them to have takeaways and tangible strategies that they can implement when they walk away from our podcast. So if we can switch gears a little bit here and talk about some of the most helpful coping tools or strategies that you cover in your book, especially for someone that might be feeling overwhelmed or unprepared for this stage of life.
Yeah, absolutely. The goal of the book is to help someone, the reader, and or their partner or loved ones feel prepared. Now, can we prepare for every possible outcome? No, we all know that menopause affects every person differently. But to have knowledge and resources literally at one's fingertips and to make these resources accessible is my goal. So whether you're 20 and reading it or 50 and reading it or 70 and reading it, I want it to be enjoyable, fun. It's a lighthearted book. It's, silly at times. It's meant to really connect with the reader. And some coping mechanisms that I think beyond reading it and feeling prepared in that way are encouraging women to talk about it. Talk about it with your mom if you can. What was her experience like? What would she do differently if she could? Talk about it with the other women in your life, whether they're family, friends, coworkers. Certainly advocate for better workplace policies. If it's not affecting you yet, or you went through menopause years ago, I almost think all the more reason for you to get involved in the workplace movement now, because it might feel less urgent for you, less overwhelming. And I do think it's up to us as a collective movement to help each other and to advocate for better workplaces for all women, for all people who need additional support. In general, sleep is always a good coping mechanism, but of course that can be difficult when you're experiencing any of the symptoms. And so to that end, finding the right providers and building your support team is huge. And that should include a well-educated menopause provider who can potentially provide hormone therapy or other medications, and a therapist, because we know that women going through the menopause transition experience a wide range of mood symptoms that are often attributed to other life stressors, which may compound those symptoms, but often are because of the hormonal fluctuations. So it's really important to find the right support. And again, support is available.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always talk about finding your tribe. And
Mhm.
when people say in perimenopause, I'm like, this doesn't affect me. I'm like, it's going to.
Yeah.
So get your team together, find your doctor or find a new doctor if your doctor's not working for you. Find your therapist, find your physical therapist, like
Mhm.
get
Yeah.
your team together.
Before, right?
Before,
Before,
yeah.
yeah, so that you're prepared. And Kim, you talk about community, building that community, and just being around other people and talking about menopause. It's been shown to decrease symptoms. So it's important for us in so many ways. I mean, you unpacked a lot there in your answer, Lauren. Sleep, community, right? Support, find your healthcare specialist that can help you. One thing that you mentioned, though, that I love is to
Mhm.
advocate for workplace policy. I know what my answer would be for this, but I'm just curious from someone that maybe isn't marinating in this every single day. How would someone do that? You know, we say advocate for workplace policy. What's one thing that someone could do in the workplace to do that? I'm putting on the
Call
spot
you
here.
guys and get a Matopia training in the workplace. It's hugely important, and the research shows that employees are eager for education. And quite frankly, education is a fairly easy thing for companies to provide as long as they invest in it. But this is not out of reach for most employers. So please, 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 at the very least, to all companies out there, set up an educational webinar, meeting, whatever it is, and start the conversation.
Mhm.
And there are other workplace policies that are hugely beneficial. I know I don't have to tell you, but whether it's in the form of tangible support like finances to pay for those menopause specialists, or access to the thermostat, or whether it is a cultural shift of simply talking about things, maybe workplace flexibility to attend appointments or just treat people like adults. There's a wide range of things that employers can and should be doing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
April always just ask. Ask for
Ask.
it. I
Yeah.
mean,
You have to ask, but speak up, right?
Yeah, that's the number one reason
Yeah,
why companies don't provide
right.
that's right.
menopause
Yep.
benefits
Yeah.
yet.
They don't feel like there is a need because no one's talking about it. And I always say ask because guess what that does? It ignites that investigation on the organization's part. They have to look and see. If you say, do we have a menopause policy? Do we have support for menopause? Do we have accommodations? They're obliged to and obligated to look into it for you. And that starts the conversation and that starts the movement and that starts action. So I love that. How might individuals advocate for themselves in the healthcare system, though? So we've talked about workplace and advocacy being incredibly important with your healthcare provider and finding that specialist that knows what they're talking about and can help you. How do you do
Mhm.
that? What does it look like for women in midlife?
I would almost go back, and before you even have to advocate for someone who knows what they're talking about, you have to navigate being dismissed by someone who doesn't.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I see it time and again for women in their 30s, especially because they bring up symptoms and they're told, well, you're just postpartum, or it's too early, or don't worry about that yet. I've heard that myself, and I think that's really dismissive, really condescending. And women are asking for information that they deserve, if not actual treatment options, which they also deserve.
Mhm.
So having a healthcare provider who's dismissive is a major red flag. There are so many resources out there that can help educate other providers, yourself. And so take advantage of those, whether it's through community resources like the ones you provide, social media, although, take the well-vetted resources from there, forums online. And then the Menopause Society provides a directory. There are also a lot of wonderful healthcare providers who refer to others who know what they're talking about, et cetera. It's really nice, I think, to have a sort of buddy in this. And again, they don't need to be having the same symptoms as you, and they probably aren't. But just, on that group chat text chain, say, hey, does anyone have a good doctor that they like, that they really feel heard by? And I have doctors who say to me, "Oh, I'm not sure about that, but I'll look into it." And that's okay because we are all learning. But what I don't want anyone to have is the provider who says, "Forget about it. We'll talk about it later."
Yeah.
Mhm.
We talk about divorcing your doctor who does that for you.
Mhm.
I'm curious when you were researching this book, what differences did you see with millennials in this time frame versus the generations that came before them? Is it a different conversation? Is it a harder conversation? Is it more open? Like what was the sort of finding that you had in looking at the generations who are dealing with menopause at all different levels?
All the women I spoke to who had already been through menopause said, "I'm so happy you're doing this because I felt so alone and in the dark when I went through it." And of
Mhm.
course, that exacerbated their symptoms, right? Physical, mental, everything. And I do think that millennials are more comfortable with these open dialogues, which is awesome. I think, again, social media has its pros and cons, but the ability to access information and such a wide range of information is really cool, right? We can use it to our advantage.
Yeah.
We can connect with others. And so social media should be used that way. And I think that millennials are more aware of, I don't want to say more aware, but they are aware of kind of the inherent misogyny in the healthcare system and not really ready or willing to take it. And I'm giving caveats because it's not that I think the generation prior was willing to take it, but I think that they almost were forced to. And hopefully that is changing. And, my generation can really make a difference and not stand for that.
And by take it, you mean get misinformation, get gaslighted, get
Yeah.
wrong information,
Yeah.
get dismissed.
Get dismissed. Right.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good.
Is there anything else that during your research, just out of curiosity, that was surprising to you?
The level of ignorance. And I say that with the kindest of hearts, and I don't mean to be critical, but as I mentioned earlier, I'm not really a science person. That's not my strength. And so when I first met Anne and I first was thinking about it, I thought maybe it's just me, maybe I missed that day in biology back in high school. And for some reason, my mom didn't talk about it with me. And okay, I felt a little dumb. And then I realized very quickly that it was absolutely not just me. And in fact, the most brilliant physicians who truly care about women's health were also taught nothing or
Yeah.
next to nothing
Yeah.
about menopause. And it just, again, boiled down to this lack of value, I think, of women's health and women's rights. And that lit a fire under me to change it.
Yeah.
You've not written a book before, right, Lauren?
I've contributed chapters to anthologies and I've written for magazines and blogs, but this is my first book.
Well,
I mean, you were like,
congratulations.
I hear this calling. I can't avoid it. I have to go after it and take care of it and solve it. And I admire that very much. So good work on, oh yeah, somebody should do this. So you're like, oh, I guess that somebody's me.
I'll do
I
it.
see.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
stepping up. So I love
Yeah.
that. And it is available for pre-order. Where can our audience pre-order the book? On any platform?
Yes, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and on my website, I provide links to all the sources. There's everywhere books are sold.
And where can they find you?
Thecounselor.com. So counselor, but LAUR for Lauren, because both therapists and lawyers provide counsel. So.
I love that. Well, what else exciting is coming up for you?
Well, I am continuing to speak and write about issues that are meaningful to me, about women's reproductive health, about working parenthood, gender equity, maternal mental health, and I have some fun family stuff going on. But yes, I will be doing a lot of book events in the New York and California areas in July. And we'll see where else it takes me. But it's really been a pleasure to connect with like-minded women who are passionate about this topic.
Yeah.
Seattle's just up the coast from California. So, come
Let's
on
Come
get
on
out
up.
over.
there.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you.
Thanks.
Well, we ask our podcast guests the same question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received or given?
So this is echoing April's earlier sentiment, which is advice from my mother, who always taught me that if you don't ask, you won't get,
Mm.
and ask with a smile. And
Oh,
I really feel that that made me who I am today because I'm not afraid to ask. I'm not afraid to confront, which gets a bad, reputation or connotations. But if you ask kindly and if you ask for the right reasons, you're going to make change. And I think that I really take that to heart.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that you learned that from your mom.
Mhm.
Oh, thanks for joining us today.
Thank
This is a
you.
great conversation and an important conversation. I think, as we noted at the very beginning of this podcast, we hear a lot from millennials that I don't need to worry about this yet. And we just talked about the importance of building your tribe and having information and educating yourself, advocating for yourself both in and outside of the workplace. So, thank you for shedding light on this topic, for writing the book, and for taking the time to be with us today. Lauren, we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And I hope I see you in person soon.
We do too.
Absolutely. And for all of our listeners, until we meet again, go find joy in the journey.
Bye, Lauren. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.